Huh. So let me get this straight. In the 2024 election, nearly 78% of farming counties voted for Trump. That's not my opinion, that's the data. Farmers were some of the strongest supporters for him. But now, China, which used to buy more than half of America's soybean crops, said, nope, not anymore. Makes sense. And they've canceled purchases, suspended imports from major U.S. exporters, and turned to Brazil instead. And that leaves American farmers with silos full of unsold crops and no buyers. And what are those farmers doing? They're turning to Washington and saying, please bail us out. They want billions in government money again. But here's the thing. Many of these same folks cheered when Medicaid was cut. They fought against universal health care. They shouted that school lunches shouldn't be free, and they called welfare a handout. But when they need help, suddenly it's not socialism. Suddenly it's survival. Now, I want to pause here because I know not every farmer voted for this. There are farmers who saw it coming, who knew this was a bad deal, and they're being dragged under too. They're in the same boat as everyone else who warned about this and didn't vote for it. And for them, it's devastating. They're staring down, losing their farms, their livelihoods, everything. That's awful, and it deserves to be acknowledged. But for those who did cheer these policies on, who turned a blind eye to the warnings, who laughed when others lost healthcare and told them they needed to pull themselves up by the bootstraps, or didn't want food programs, your hatred, your racism, and your refusal to see the writing on the wall, that's what landed you here. And now you're finding out just how expensive that ignorance really is. So yes, you're in a hard position, and you probably feel like you're about to lose everything. But I hope you remember this moment, because the same government safety nets that you've mocked, that you've judged, and you've denied others are now the only thing you're hoping will save you. That's not rugged independence. That's not free markets. That's hypocrisy. And it's costing all of us.
Has anybody figured out where our bumper crop of soybeans are going? Yeah, because this administration has messed things up so badly with China. China goes, yeah, keep your soybeans, we're good. The biggest buyer in the world of soybeans has said, don't worry about it, we're good. So why doesn't somebody tell me, or tell the U.S. farmers that are bringing in all these soybeans, tell them what they're going to do with them? Somebody needs to come up with a plan, and like really, really quick. Because guess what? China said, thanks, but no thanks. So where are all these soybeans going to go? Does anybody know? Does anybody care? Because I'm sure the farmers are freaking out right now because they have a bumper crop of soybeans that, yeah, nobody wants. At least China doesn't want. And China's the biggest, largest buyer. I mean, we could be selling the small countries, but it's not going to put a dent in the soybeans that we have. Is anyone going to start talking about this? Or are we just going to pretend it's not a massive, huge problem because of this administration? Like and follow for more.
Doug Fuller's family has been farming in northern Polk County for generations.
Now I get to call all the shots.
He's already nervous about the cash crop he's about to start planting. Soybeans are the target of China's retaliatory tariff, 10% on certain imports from the United States, in response to President Trump's 10% blanket tariff on Chinese goods. Fuller is fearful it spells bad news for the 2025 harvest.
You know, they aren't good for the other countries, they aren't good for me. And who could blame them putting reciprocal tariffs on us? You know, it's just a match, you know, and nobody's going to win.
China is one of the largest overseas markets for American soybeans. According to the USDA, the United States exported nearly $13 billion in soybeans to China last year alone. Fuller has already faced 2 years of bean prices dropping and says it looks as if the trend may continue.
Last year we took a step back, and now we're taking another step back. So you know, many of us will, we'll get through it. and it's going to be tough on others.
Estimates show that China's retaliatory tariffs could cost American soybean farmers roughly $5.9 billion in lost revenue. How are you and other farmers reacting?
We're very concerned, Phil. We have a precedent from the trade war we went through about 7 years ago that was devastating to the American soybean farmer. Over that period of time, we lost nearly $20 billion of trade with China. Trade is 50% of the acres that are produced in the United States. And of that, currently 25% of our soybeans that we raise go to China.
China announced will no longer buy U.S. soybeans anymore. Why? My name is Lick. In today's video, we are going to talk about why China refused to buy soybeans from USA. On the other hand, farmers are struggling. They don't know where they can sell soybeans because China is the largest market they ever had, because China used to import 60% of their soybeans. We got more video like this. Remember that credit goes to the owner of the video. Please subscribe. I'll come back with a comment. Let's jump into it.
In Pennsylvania's Trump country, where he won 75% of the vote, farmers are finding out what mass deportation actually means. This is John Painter. He voted for Trump 3 times. He runs an organic dairy farm. He hired a Mexican couple who worked for him for 2 years. Great workers, paid taxes. Then the husband got pulled over in New York while visiting family, and eventually he was deported, and his wife followed him. Painter lost his workforce. Now he is scrambling to find new help. Now meet Tim Wood. He is another Trump voter and a dairy farmer. Thanks to Trump's mass deportation, he now cannot find consistent workers. The stress is literally giving him a heart condition. His doctor asked about his biggest stressor, and his answer was, if I'm going to have workers tomorrow. He's had to sell 100 head of cattle because he has no one to help him care for them. The U.S. agricultural workforce fell by 155,000 workers. That's about 7% between March and July. But one farmer said, people don't understand, if we don't get more labor, our crops don't get picked. Now, we don't know if these farmers were anti-immigrant before, but they are definitely not now. Here's Painter talking about his now deported employee. I understand that he was here illegally, but I also understand that he's human. They want the American dream, and they want to work. He now admits that he's, quote, very disappointed in Trump's immigration policy this term. But here's the thing. Trump literally campaigned on mass deportation. This is not a surprise policy twist. I guess a lot of people just don't understand what policies mean until they affect their own lives. Maybe that's a lesson for all of us to think more deeply about what and who we're voting for. Because it turns out when the leopard comes for your face, it doesn't care whose flag is hanging on your wall.
To all my farmer neighbors, my name is Susie, and I live in rural Missouri. You were warned over and over and over. We told you there was no drag queen story hour. There were no furries in our school using litter boxes. But you guys refused to call the superintendent of the schools like I did. I called Rolla Public Schools and asked Dr. Dare if there was any truth to that. He laughed and said maybe I was watching too much TV. We told you that China signed 20-year contracts with Brazil for soybeans. You laughed in our face. I'm not going to say I told you so, but I do not want to bail you out for the next 20 years, and I will fight against it. China signed 20-year contracts with Brazil for soybeans because of Donald J. Trump. They don't want our soybeans. They don't want our beef. They don't want our wheat. They don't want anything we grow. As far as we're concerned, China can stick it up our ass. And can you blame them? Can you really blame them?
Today, $13 billion were lost from the U.S. economy because China announced it will no longer be buying U.S. soybeans. Instead, they're going to buy them from Brazil. That's about $13 billion worth of exports just gone. I don't know if you guys know how much of the United States is just dedicated to growing soybeans, but take a trip around the South. Take a trip around like North Carolina, for example. You'll see there's soybean fields everywhere. Primary customer of those, China. Chinese firms. I don't think people are getting it, man. Like, even if the tariffs got canceled today, I mean, the damage is done effectively. I mean, it's going to take years for the United States to regain, if it ever can at this point, its position within the global trade infrastructure. Because global trade is only possible because of a system of handshakes, a system of trust between trading partners, where everybody trusts that the other parties in any trade deal are going to maintain the same systems and agreements for harvesting, packaging, transporting, unloading, and reselling goods between each other. And what the United States has done here over the last 90 days, it's only been 90 days, is it has said to the entire world, we cannot wrangle our worst impulses. Because we could have wrangled them, right? Congress could have stood up to Trump, gotten their stuff together, and said, hey, between the House and the Senate, we have more than enough people who are all dismayed at the dismantling of the global order, which has built all of this untold wealth in this country. So we are going to pass a bill and then use a congressional override in the event that a bill was vetoed in order to take the powers of tariffs back from the president in their unilateral ability to do so, which is how Trump is able to do what he's doing now. But they did not do that. What did they do instead? They cowered, right? They bent the knee because they're all afraid of this guy and his little minion from South Africa. And the cost they are paying, right, is the cost to their own bottom lines as private individuals, because they have investment portfolios that are also not doing too hot and will continue to not do too hot in a declining fashion, an accelerating rate of decline, I might add, the longer this goes on. And they're also selling off all of their kids' futures. You know, whatever legacy these people are hoping to leave for just themselves and their family, I mean, they're destroying it, whole cloth, right here. It's not fathomable. I mean, like the acquiescence of duty, I mean, alone, of course we know that congressional representatives don't care about duty for the most part, but the acquiescence of sense over to this little demon. I mean, it's just, oh my God.
China canceled orders of soybeans from USA because they got another deal. They signed a deal with Brazil, some country from Africa, which is going to cost a lot. They even invest in infrastructure in Brazil because they determined they'll never go back to buy soybeans from USA. No beef, soybean, everything from USA. What you don't know, what I'm saying, China used to buy 60% of soybeans from USA. Can you imagine? It's a lot of tons. And what you don't know, American farmer has no idea where to sell that soybeans. I keep saying soybeans, but don't forget beef, don't forget wheat, don't forget many things they used to buy from USA. We still have another video. Let's watch it. I'll come back with a comment.
I'm out here in the farm fields of Illinois. This is a bean field that just turned brown in mid-September. And there's a lot of concern over where the product that these farmers in Illinois have raised is going to be going and what kind of price they'll get for the crops they've raised. I grew up in this area. I went to Little Cayman High School. It's about 2 miles north of here. And I went to school with all the farm kids, and I even grew up in eastern Pennsylvania and went to school with Amish and Mennonite kids in Lancaster County. And growing up, I had an uncle who ran a farm in upstate New York. So I have some history with an empathy for farmers, because I watch how hard they work to get this crop on the ground, and its timing and the rains in spring, whether they come or not. One year it was too wet, the next year it's too dry. It's tough being a farmer. But what's even tougher is growing all this crops and having all the equipment and debt you need to be a farmer, and then be cast aside by things like tariffs. And that's what's so confusing to me. The people out here in farm country, a lot of them have Trump signs in their lawns. There's a huge one up the road here. When I'm cycling over the summer, I see them all over the place. Probably see 10 to 20 in a 40-mile ride. And that indicates to us that farmers are big into Republican values, and that's the other side of the coin here. You know, what is the ideology driving people to want to be Republican? Well, over the centuries, you know, that we've had farming here in the United States, there's been a lot of deception by conservatives. You know, the Dust Bowl came about because people were told to go on out, God will help you, and rain will follow the plow. And that was a lie. And what we wound up with is agricultural conditions that basically turned the entire Great Plains to dust. And there's sort of a similar thing going on in Illinois in many states, because soils are not in a great condition here either. And there's just sort of been this profit-oriented idea that it's your job to go and grind up the soil and get what you can out of it, get the best price for it, and we'll take care of the rest. You know, it's that classic sort of go, go, go ideology that people pride themselves on in America. But, you know, sustainability is a real problem. That's true in terms of economic markets, where a lot of crops from the United States are sold to other countries, for example, China. And now we've imposed tariffs on China, and guess who winds up paying the price? It's Illinois and Iowa and Wisconsin and Missouri and Nebraska and all these farmers that, you know, work their lives trying to sustain their crop output every year. And Trump doesn't care about those people, but what he does do, and this is sort of his method, he has never had a good grasp of forecasting policy. He bankrupted casinos, for instance, right? And many, many of his businesses failed, and those that did sort of succeed were dependent on creative bookkeeping. The guy is not a good planner. He could never be a good farmer. He sucks at everything he does. But somehow he came up with this let's do something about our markets idea with tariffs, and they've never been proven to work. And right now, something like 86 to 90% of the tariffs are being absorbed not by foreign companies, but by Americans paying higher product prices. And the farmers are the ones that get kicked right in the nuts. And what does Trump do? He uses taxpayer money to pay them off for the fuck-ups that he did. And that's the sick aspect of it. And all these guys with Trump signs out here, they're happy to ask for handouts now when many of them apparently don't like, you know, the idea that immigration people come here and, oh, they're using our tax dollars. Blame immigrants for everything. Well, guess what? A lot of our farm production, especially things like fruits and vegetables and everything, are reliant on immigrant workers. And so Trump is so fucking dumb about what really happens here on the earth that he's screwing everybody over. And these farmers out here, you sort of have to have empathy for them because they've been lied to. They've been deceived. And we need small farmers as well as big farmers. But during Trump's first term, when he first messed up with farm markets, Sonny Perdue, his Secretary of Agriculture, said to American farmers, tough luck, go big or go away. And so corporatized farmers, farming, and the seed crops owned by giant firms like Bayer and Monsanto and all of that are taking over. And if we don't have any local control over how food's produced, we're at the mercy of all of that, the corporatization of America and the oligarchy. And if you don't connect these dots and see that people out here are being deceived, and these are the same people basically voting for Trump, then you don't get it. Where will these crops go? We really don't know. They may rot in the bins, in the dryers, everything.
Donald Trump destroyed everything he touched because he destroyed tourism business, he destroyed different type of business in USA. Now it's time for farmer. But what I like is that Majority of farmers, like 70%, are the one who vote for him. You guys will get what you voted for. Thank you for watching today's video. I hope you like it. Share, comment, see you on another one. I love you guys.